At Home with Cathy. I'm Cathy, and we're going to look for a few minutes before we get started on this week's project on the things we've been doing over the last couple of weeks. One of the things we did was our stenciled rug. This is a cotton chindie rug, and we used one of Annie's stencils called Trees. Just did a very simple pattern on it. And on the other side, to make it reversible, we did a block printing using a sponge and two colors. We did Florence and Scandinavian pink, Florence on the other side, just colors that work well in my house. So now this rug is ready to go. Once the paint is cured and dried, you can start using it. I probably wouldn't wash it for a couple of weeks, but now it's been about a week or so, so it's ready to go. Let's have a look at the other project we started about a week or so ago. This is a faux leather chair that we have painted. We have the arms and the legs are done. It's taken me longer to complete this chair than a day, for sure. And one of the reasons is the fabric is some sort of a nylon, faux leather nylon. I really don't know what it is, but it takes a long time to absorb the paint, and it takes even longer for it to dry. So it now has, I think, 6, maybe 7 coats of half paint, half water. If I put the paint on just solid paint, it's going to dry and crack. So I'm mixing my paint. I'm using Napoleonic blue, and I'm doing it as a wash, half water, half paint. I do a coat, I have to let it dry. The other thing I found really interesting about this is I can't do it in artificial light. I simply can't see the changes in the color. So I have to wait for daylight, which when you're working all day and you're coming home to paint at night means I've got about an hour to get this right every night. So I'm doing it either first thing in the morning or before I go to work or when I get home. And it's been a very interesting project. It's certainly been the most challenging of anything I've painted. And I'm not sure if you can see, but here is a good example. There's a blue here that is brighter than the blue next to it. And one of the things I realized when working with anything that's tufted is the paint tends to pool in here. You walk away, you think you're all done, you come back and check it, and there's a drip that's coming down. So I've learned to paint the back first, then paint the rest of it, and go back and catch all my drips. So it's coming, and I've sanded off almost all the picks that were here now. I've sanded between every second coat, I would say. The last thing I realized was it's a little bit too perfect when it's all blue. I'm supposed to be making it look like, or in my mind, I'm supposed to be making it look like an old leather chair. So now what I'm going to do is the next coat is going to be a wash of graphite. And I'm going to go to all the edges, into all of the cracks and crevices, anywhere there's a crease, and do a wash of graphite so that I can pull back the blue a little bit around the edges and leave the Napoleonic showing where it would have worn, so that the dark is where it would least wear and the lighter paint or the lighter color is where it would most wear. Then I'm going to do a brown wax. I also have a cat that lies on everything I ever do. So one thing you'll notice is he's also a bit of a drooler. This is where he was drooling, and you can see what happens when the paint hasn't been protected. He's actually discolored the paint a little bit. So I can't decide if I'm going to leave that and make it look like it was part of the distressed leather look. Probably the perfectionist in me will say, no, that won't work. But we'll have a look at it anyway. But it's just interesting that that's how susceptible the paint is until we actually get a protective coat on it. So in a couple weeks, I'll have this finished and we will do its final reveal. But let's get started on this week's project. Working with our quick and easy paint transformations, I decided to cut myself a little bit of a break after working on the chair. That chair project is still going to be going on, so I need something quick and easy. Decoupage is definitely a quick and easy project to do. We're following instructions for the decoupage chest, only we're not going to be working on a dresser drawer or anything like that. We're going to work on a tray. But all the instructions are in this book, and it is very easy to do because really all you need is a project, paint, image transfer, which also works for decoupage, and something to put on as a decoupage. So once again, the most difficult part of this project is deciding what color to paint your tray. And I find I don't have a lot of opportunity to use the pinks in the palette because they don't work with everything I have, but they do look good in almost every room. It just is an accent. So I thought this might be kind of nice to have in my boho room as a little table on the dresser when guests come. The boho colors are on the wall behind me, the guest room boho chic, and these colors work really well with that. So to start, you're going to paint just like everything else. Now, this is a very inexpensive little tray I've had for years and years. It has a painted image on it, and because I don't want that image to come through, I don't want to see the circles or the, you know, the lines. I can feel a little bit of the paint. I'm just going to rough it up just a little bit. It really doesn't take that much, and the paper is going to, that I'm using, is going to hide it anyway. I'm just going to rough it up just a little bit and grab a cloth here. Wipe out the dust, and I'm ready to paint. Let's move this. I chose Henrietta because it's got a nice kind of mauvey color to it, and it looked really good. These napkins are so pretty, and I thought it would be a really nice color to use on the napkin, or use the napkins to decoupage with. Bring out the purpley pink in them. I'm going to start by just painting the whole tray. I'm going to go all around. It'll probably take 2 coats of paint, so we'll do one, and we'll set the tray to dry while we get our napkin ready for using for the decoupage, and that only takes a few minutes unless they're stuck together really, really well. But here I do want to get into all the little crevices in here, and when you're working with a handle, you're working this way, and you can see how paint comes out. You have to pick up your drips here and keep going around. And I probably will paint the bottom of the tray too, just to finish it, but I don't have to do that at this moment. Going all the way around, nice even coat all the way around. Come back and do my other. Painting a tray is a little bit tricky because you've got to somehow figure out how to hold on to it while you're painting it. You can see the drips coming through the handle here. And I do want to make sure I get the inside of my handle painted. So now I can put this down. I'm going to put it down on a couple of blocks. Just raises it off the table a little bit so that I can paint around it and it's not sticking to the cloth. This is one of those projects you can really complete in an hour or two, because all you really have to do is wait for paint to dry. Get in here and get a good coat on. There, so there's my first coat of my Henrietta, and I'm going to put this to dry, put a fan on it and get it drying, and we're going to work on the napkin. Getting ready to decoupage, I'm using paper napkins. You need paper napkins, you need a marker or something to help you trace out where you're going. In this case, I'm going to put them in the whole flat round bottom of my tray. I've got 2 pairs of scissors, depending on how detailed I want to get, and my image transfer or decoupage glue. So the first thing I have to do is, and I'll give you a little hint here, read how many plies you have. If you have 3-ply napkins, you know you've got to pull 2 pieces of paper off the back, because when you look at a napkin, and they work beautifully for decoupage. Of course, it's plain paper on the back and your pattern on the front. Nacho's disagreeing with me in the hallway. So what you have to do is just gently pull this apart. And it's tricky to do because they're kind of punched together so that you can't do this. Of course, when I did the first one yesterday, it was, simple and worked really well. Sometimes you can kind of rub them apart in the middle. Okay, so here's my first one. My first paper is coming off. You can see it's just plain, but you can still see that I still have quite a bit of white on the back. So that means I have a second paper. And you look at this and you think, well, that's just not possible. There can't be another piece of paper on here. I just keep playing with it until I get that edge. Now, when you're pulling this second piece off, be a little bit more careful. I tend to use one hand to pull and one hand to hold, and move your other hand up so that it's not going to tear. And then just do it evenly so you don't tear it. There. So now I have two pieces that I'm not going to use for anything. And I have two pieces ready to go. Now, these have a pattern to them. You can see there are lines going through it as though there are boards on the background. I have to be a little bit conscious of how I put this together on my tray, because if I wasn't paying attention, I could screw it up, and now I'm going to make it look funny if I change the lines. The other thing is there are words printed on the very edge of the napkin, because of course this is somebody's proprietary image, so they've put that on there. So what I'm going to do is, when my tray is dry, I'm going to center my napkin, my first one. I'm going to cut this one most likely in half, and then try to fit the images so that they sort of blend together. The nice thing about this pattern is, even if it's not perfect, if the images don't completely match up, as long as I match up my lines going across, the eye will be fooled, and you won't know that I used two different napkins. So my tray is just about dry, and we're going to dry fit this first. When we're getting ready to decoupage, it's really a good idea, if you're working with something that you can't change once you've done it, to dry fit the whole thing. Do a dry run. I want the napkin is almost going to center itself perfectly. And then I just need to make sure, but you can see that I'm going to be a little bit shy on the ends. So one trick, and this is a trick we use in fabric when you work with fabric, is to cut it down the middle. Because then when I go to this edge, I'm not going to have two finished edges at the same place. Now what I do need to do, I also have a little bit of room to play here, because I need to make sure that my pattern doesn't look silly. I need it to kind of overlap a little bit. So here's an example. I've got a great connection here, but my yellow is going into blue. It doesn't connect right here. So I'm going to switch my pieces and see if I do better, and I may not. I do. I go this way, and then I have to make sure my lines are lined up. I may get a better connection here. So then I need to smooth this out the best I can. I'm going to flip it over. So I'm drawing on the wrong side. Smooth it in. I'm going to smooth it right out, and I'm going to use my fingernails to kind of push it in. See if I can make a line that way. When I do actually decoupage, it's going to stretch the paper just a little tiny bit. I'll take a marker. Could use a pencil, only this morning there didn't seem to be a pencil that actually had a lead in it. So I'm going to just do it, just a gentle marker line into the corner. Actually, all the pencils were there, they just needed to be sharpened, and I didn't take the time. So I've got my line drawn, and I'm going to cut to the inside of that line. I don't want the marker to show. I could do this so many ways. I could rip it and have a raggedy edge on it. I could have done a transfer or a decoupage that's only in the middle here and done a border of some sort around it, painted it a different color, done some gilding. There's so many things. There's absolutely no way to do this wrong. This is so whatever makes you happy. The other thing I'm going to do is down at the very end on one side I have my writing. I don't want my writing, so I'm just going to cut off a strip to make sure I get rid of that writing. There. So now my first napkin is laying in the tray, and I just have to get the ends done. Line up my print or my lines, try and line up my blues. I don't want too much overlap here because you will see it when the print comes through. It's like you need 3 hands at this point. Just put that down and then use my fingers again to just kind of make that work. I'm going to put a little pair of scissors in there just to hold that. There's probably somebody out there saying, oh Kathy, there's an easier way to do that. And if you know that way, please call me or send me an email. Okay, draw that line out. Again, cutting out just to the other side of the marker because I don't want that line. In here. Now I can trim it up a little bit to make it perfect. Okay, so we're going to finish this up. We're going to put a second coat of paint around the tray and put it to dry and then work on the actual decoupage. Now we come to the fun part. We get to actually decoupage. We're going to use something called Image Medium. It's sort of a glue. It's white. I'm going to paint it on the bottom of the tray. This is why I only needed 1 coat of paint on the bottom of the tray because I'm going to cover it. I just needed a coat of paint to actually hide the images that were there and to blend out any of the, because there was a sort of a hand painted fruit bowl on the bottom. Just going to spread the glue on, just using a little chip brush. I like these little ones because they fit right into the jars. Spread it all over. Make sure I get it on there evenly all the way around. Now here's a little thing. Let's say you cut your napkins or you cut your whatever you're going to use for decoupage and you can't get it to sit properly. Maybe what you thought was an oval tray isn't even, or it's just really hard to get the pattern to fit. You could do a frayed edge. You could take your, let's just use a little piece here. You could take your napkin and instead of using the cut edge, you could rip it. This is actually a really nice thing to do with a paper napkin because it gives it kind of a feathery edge, and this little feathery edge actually lays down better in the glue. So we're going to do that with the outside edge of this napkin because I realized as I was trying to trace this out, the tray is not perfectly oval. So I'm just going to, maybe 1/4 of an inch all the way around, just ripping it off. The other thing it's doing is it's taking off the little kind of dotted edge where that's what they used to sort of hold the pieces of paper together. They can't, the layers of paper, they can't glue it obviously because it's a napkin. So I've just created this little kind of feathery edge, and I'm going to do it on the other side. I'm not going to do it, I could do it on the clean side. Oops, don't drop it into the glue. If I did it on the clean side, it would also help butt those together, so we'll do it there too. Just going to go all the way along, that off, and I am going to go down this side just to help fudge the transition where the two little end pieces have to go. Don't want to rip too much off, just a little bit. And last side. Then I'm going to work from the center. What I don't want are any bubbles in my decoupage. So I've spread this all out. There have been times when I have done decoupage on things where I've actually ironed the creases out. I'm not going to do that today because it's a tray. It's not going to be something, it's always going to have probably something on it. I'm going to kind of fold it. I want it to be centered. Just going to gently lay it down first to see that I have it where I want it to be, and then before I stick it down hard, I can move it if I need to. I'm going to start in the middle and just gently rub it in. I'm holding this edge up as I work. That helps me eliminate any bubbles. I'm just going to work from this edge. I could use a scraper, something with a bit of an edge, but I find my fingers work well because I can feel the bubbles. This is a great pattern to work with too because you're not actually going to see any bubbles. There's so much pattern on here. Go all the way. Make sure when you get to the outside edge of your, don't pick up any glue, but make sure you get your edge brushed, pushed down firmly. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Pick it up and just work my way over to the other edge, working kind of from the center out. Nice. Now this edge is down. Now because I have to transition a little bit, I'm going to just use my sticky brush and brush down this edge because this edge is going to join to the other edge. You can also use my brush. It's a great thing to use to just push down all the way along. Okay, and now I've got my two end pieces. Same thing. Just going to rip this all off. Create that little feathery edge. Here with the inside edge. And here I have to be a little bit more careful before I lay it down because I need to make sure that I line up my lines so that I have it on the right side. No, this is the right one. From one end and go all the way up and just press it down with my fingers. Now there's a little hole right here where I ripped a bit too much off. Again, I can just grab a little piece of this pattern, this paper, and just stick it right in there. It'll just blend into the pattern. Use my brush to tap it down. It'll blend in. Do the same thing for the other side and we're all ready for the next step. I have my napkin decoupaged on here. My lines are pretty good. You'd have to really look closely to know where I added the end pieces. And now what I do, this actually becomes my varnish. So I gently, because the paper is wet, I am gently going to just use the image transfer medium or the decoupage glue, whatever you want to call it, making sure that I go all the way out to the edge. So when I do here, I want to press down. I don't want to drag the brush this way because I could pull my edge. I want to just press down with the brush a little bit and draw. It becomes a varnish is what it does. I probably will do 3-4 coats of this because it's a tray and it could potentially have something wet on it. Maybe I'm going to use it, to serve drinks or coffee, or maybe it's going to be in the bedroom and have water on it, a water pitcher. I do want to make sure that I make it as waterproof as I can. Otherwise that paper is just going to be a soggy mess on the bottom of my tray one day. So because I need to do that, I need to make sure that I'm all the way out to the edge. It'll take a little bit of time to dry between coats. You can tell when it's dry, it gets shiny and clear, and then I will do another coat. So probably 2 or 3 coats, and then I will wax the whole tray, the rest of it where the paint is. One of these coats, while it's drying, I'll just flip it over and do the bottom so that I can make that all the same beautiful Henrietta, and it's easy enough to let that dry because it can rest here while this is all dry. So just making sure I've got this all over here. So the last brush over, I'm just going gently, making sure I don't catch anywhere. And then I did cover all of the edges. And as you can see, it's quite white. It will dry clear. We'll do 2 or 3 more coats, up to 5. It just depends on the use you're going to do. And you'll be able to tell because you can feel it getting harder. And when the next time you come back, we'll have a finished tray. Maybe we'll serve drinks. So I invite you to come into the store, Absolutely Fabulous at Home, and ask us about all your paint projects. We are happy to share your enthusiasm for making something old into something new. Thank you for joining me.